Welcome to today's first Chesapeake Chat sponsored by Newport News Shipbuilding. My name is Annika Seth, and I am a first Chesapeake FTC and FRC alumni, as well as an alumni ambassador sponsored by Booz Allen Hamilton. I am here to introduce today's first Chesapeake Chat. I want to thank this session sponsor, Newport News Shipbuilding, for making this chat possible. Just some housekeeping, and then we're going to get the speakers to present and open up for discussion questions later on if there is time. Just put questions in the chat if they come up throughout, and we'll get to them all during the course of the session. As a quick reminder, the volunteer registration system is now open for FTC volunteers with our next hybrid event of this season this Saturday, January 8th. We again have remote roles available, like judging, making it easy to support our STEM community even from far away. Please visit our webpage at firstchesapeake.org/volunteer for instructions and links to register. Let's get started. Today's chat topic is surviving inspection, building the robot you know will pass, and tips from FRC Inspectors. At this time, I want to introduce our speaker, Dr. Kate McBrien, a first Chesapeake lead robot inspector. Thanks for being here, Dr. McBrien. I'll now turn it over to you to share a little bit about yourself, and then feel free to start your presentation. Thanks so much.
Okay. As she said, my name's Kate. I have been volunteering for FIRST Robotics as an inspector since we started doing the DC regionals back in the day. Originally, I was part of Team 1212, which is an Arizona team. So luckily, not a whole lot of conflicts over here. I came to Maryland to study robotics for graduate school, where I got my University of Maryland, where I got my PhD, and now I work for the Naval Research Lab doing robotics. So, and I've been a lead robot inspector probably about 3 or 4 years now.
Super cool. Thanks so much. And then if you wanted to go through your presentation, that'd be really awesome. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Okay, my plan here is kind of give you a brief how to survive inspections, building the robots you will know will pass, some of the tips, and just some of the highlights of things we're looking for. Before I get too much in depth of this, I do want to point out that the inspection checklist, which is the checklist, you see all those inspectors walking around with on their clipboards. It's 2 pages, 1 page front and back. You can download this before your competition. I don't believe this year's is up yet. Last year's is currently up, previous years. And probably 95, 98% of it is all the same from previous years. Some of the numbers change, but what we're looking for hasn't really changed much in 10 years. So this isn't inspections is not a pop quiz that you can't really prepare for. You literally have, all the answers in the rule book. And then we also give you the checklist of, here's even the narrowed down study guide with all the specific things we're going to be looking for. So inspections should not be scary. They're not bad. So brief overview, just inspections are done to make sure, first off, every robot is safe, and then all the robots are playing by the same rules. We're really just making sure no one has the competitive advantage. And you have to complete your inspection before a qualification match, and it has to be inspected at every competition. So if you're going to multiple districts, you do have to get re-inspected. If you're going to a pre-inspection event, you still have to get inspected at a competition. So we don't want to have any errors and penalties if, you forgot to get inspected because it was inspected before. So real quick, some of the differences this year as opposed to previous ones last year, it's going to be much faster, much quicker pace. So a lot of these district events are pretty much now 1-day events, and there's fewer people in the pit. So just all of those timelines we're used to are going to kind of shrink. So not only is it faster inspections, it's faster back-to-back matches. With 18 teams in a day, there's 6 robots on the field at once. You're playing every 3rd match, which means, if your plan is to replace batteries, change bumper colors, and recharge pneumatics in between those matches, you're looking at doing all of that and making any repairs 10, 12, 15 minutes, not a whole lot of time. So one of the rules in the past has always been a guideline, is that bumpers should be able to be installed or removed by 2 people in fewer than 5 minutes. Typically in the past, this was not a rule that most inspectors, we really got hung up about, especially at least the Chesapeake inspectors I know of. We didn't, really like it if you took 20, 30 minutes to change your bumpers and we were standing there waiting to get through inspection. But specifically this year, that 5-minute guideline is really kind of crucial, especially if you don't have a quick change color one. And then the other main thing this year, not just is turnaround matches is faster pace. Inspection, we have a lot less time. So we'll be asking you, have you done an inspection with the checklist? Before you get there, generally before an inspector has shown up, we're going to ask you guys, have you gone through the checklist? And that checklist, like I said, will be available on the main FRC website. And if you want to get a head start and, see what last year's looked like, because I went through it. I think there are 3 differences that I saw. One of which was like the perimeter number has changed, height restrictions changed, and I think at this point we don't believe we're requiring the bill of materials. That's one thing you just don't have to worry about. Okay. Inspections. So usually you sign up for inspections at the inspection table. We send an inspector to your pit, and here's what you will need for inspection. One robot. If there are 2 robots in your pit, we will take one of your robots and put it in robot jail because you can't have 2 robots. So 1 robot. We want to see a pit, 1 robot. You need at least 1 battery, 2 bumper sets, red and blue. And most importantly, tools to remove and attach those bumpers, the drive station, and the tether to connect to it. Many times, some inspections are held up for a little bit because, they can't find that tether. We haven't hooked it up, you haven't hooked it up in the pit, and all that. And then we need some people, students, someone who can attach, remove the bumper, power on the robot. Generally, start the software, lifting the robot on and off the scale. I often see mentors doing this. I would prefer it if the students did it. And then just some way to move the robot to the weighing station, preferably a cart. Sorry, not a car, a cart. And we need 1 mentor to sign the paperwork. So you only really need 1 mentor with you. And again, the ability to say you've gone through the checklist yourself. So there are a few tools you need, and then mostly just people who can have this, who can perform these different tasks. Okay, at this point, I was going to go through the different sections of our inspection sheet. So there's a couple main sections: mechanical, electrical, pneumatics, and power on. And then there's a bumper section. And those are kind of the main areas of the inspection sheets. I'm not going to go over all of the rules and details with them, but just kind of highlight a few of them. Okay. Our main mechanical concerns, common concerns, are the frame perimeter and the weight. General rule of thumb is if there's a limit given to you in the rulebook, don't build to the limit. Often, if you build everything to get a frame perimeter of 120, some things don't quite align or they don't quite end up flush. 1/4 of an inch there, 1/2 an inch there, suddenly your frame perimeter on all the different corners, suddenly you're now like 1 inch over. So if you just aim to just be a little bit smaller, also do that with the weight. I know a lot of teams don't have nice scales. We never had one for my robotics team. We used the bathroom scale. My one note is if you keep reducing the weight and the bathroom scale doesn't seem to be changing, have someone else stand on it. Sometimes these scales have gotten fancy and will remember your weight and have a little, if you've only changed 0.1 pound, I'm not going to reflect on it because you just weighed yourself 30 seconds ago. So we've definitely had some teams who they came to competition and they're like, the scale wasn't moving. But yeah, try to weigh your components as you go on. Just try to weigh the robot before you get there, and try not to build to the limit. Give yourselves a little bit of margin. It really makes the headaches just a lot easier. There's not a lot of time this year, so cutting the corners off your robots, literally cutting your robots in half, not a good year to do that. Just a few other tips, if you find sharp edges, please put something over your computer and your electronics to, get those shards, little filings out of your computer. If you have a gremlin working there, vacuum out your computer and your electronics. And then my final tip, I'm going to start speeding up here. Have an easy starting configuration. Your starting configuration is everything must be within the frame perimeter, so nothing sticking out. I know in the past people have had to really shove pieces in to make sure it was in the right one that immediately fold out once the game starts. Quick turnaround, robots are going to get beat up, less time. So just mentors, remember your students have to set this robot up on the field multiple times during a day in competition. It gets hard. And you have 5 refs watching you as you set this up. So it is not a stress-free thing to do. Oh, and the amount of weight you remove from lightning holes is pretty much equivalent to the weight of metal shards or dust you get from that drill bit. Lightning holes are not a good option. Do not Swiss cheese your robot. There's usually a better way of reducing the weight of the robot. Okay, moving on. Electrical systems. Most common problems, wire gauges and color. Yes, we care about them, and they are in the rules of which colors you can use and which wire gauges for different types. I'm not going to get into that. It is, you can find it in the rules. Also, if your wire gauge is oversized, we don't care. You can always go, heavier duty wire, which is lower number. But yeah, we just don't want any wires, not being strong enough and then catching on fire. We don't like the magic smoke to get out of the robot. Main one here, battery security. If your robot flips upside down, the battery has to stay in it. If your robot in the last match flips upside down, it still has to stay connected. We want to have batteries stay in the robots. A lot of times we'll see batteries start to fall out later in the day, and that's mostly because people forget to strap your batteries down. So make it quick and easy. If you can, bolt that strap onto the robot so somebody can't walk off with the strap when they have to run to the bathroom right after, right after a match and right before another one. Then my final electrical one is the main breaker accessibility. This is another one in the rules. They say make it easily accessible, easy to hit. And how you define easy is up for debate. My general rule is, can you run and hit the main breaker to turn your robot off if it is driving uncontrollably straight towards your grandma? And then on the second note, can somebody else do that not on your team? So, label it, make it clearly labeled, don't have it buried in so I have to reach past a moving mechanism over the wheels to hit that emergency stop button. That's not something you're going to be able to do running after your robot. So that's one of those, try to make it accessible as possible. We understand game pieces are flying around, but there are some things that you can make it happen and still make it safe so game pieces don't trigger it. Yeah. Pneumatics concerns. So these are always a big one that prevent a lot of people from using pneumatics. Pneumatics sound scary. They're really not. We love pneumatics. They're great. This is one of those things you kind of follow the diagram, and the tricky parts gets in when you're attaching the solenoids and the cylinders together and how to make it work. So there's a lot of examples on how to do it in the rule books, and I'm just going to point out some of the things I have seen. Number one, the computer is what turns off the compressor when it hits 120 psi, not students watching a gauge and telling the driver it has to turn off now. That's a good way of leading to the whole system getting overpressured, and that can lead to very bad things. Gauges should be easy to read, and not just for us inspectors so we can manage it really quickly. That way you can also see if they got charged in between matches. So while it does help us and make sure the robot is safe, there is a reason we put it on there, and that's also for you guys. The pressure relief valve. That is always the tricky one that people are like, I don't know what this is. This is the pressure relief valve. It is we all built. So we've all been building robots or have built robots. If you're like me, you don't quite trust anything software-wise to make sure things don't explode. And that is true with pneumatics. We have a mechanical backup where if the pressure is too great, it releases a spring and then it'll start venting pressure. And I'll do this just a little bit to make sure it doesn't go up. And that is what this pressure release valve, and that's in that bottom right corner, that bottom corner is. You can, the ones in the kit of parts, you can adjust it so it is set for a higher pressure. Usually, teams do this accidentally. I kind of point out where you grab it with the wrench when you're tightening it in versus where you grab it with the wrench when you are adjusting it. Most of the time, we just see people grab it wherever they can, crank it down. Usually it makes it fully open, and usually that means it's going to set for about 150, 160 PSI. If you haven't seen this be checked in the past or don't know how to check this one, I actually recommend don't worry about it. We'll deal with that one in inspections. This is one of those, it is going to take too long to explain. Don't worry about it. Make sure you have it there. We'll set it when you get there. Or you can buy the McMaster part, which is just automatically set for 135. Okay, my final pneumatics tip is having so many leaks that the pressure never builds up to the limits is not the same as the system working and being safe, and it will not pass inspection. At that point, we will probably, can you see my cursor?
No, I don't think we can.
Okay.
But I think if you go to like the settings pane in Streamer, you can probably get like a laser pointer up if you want.
No worries. If you have so many leaks, we cannot check your system. We will probably put a line coming out from your working pressure gauge. If you follow that diagram right after that regulator, and just it'll go nowhere. And then we can test all the safety systems, upstream. And then you can have as many leaks downstream as you want. I don't recommend it, but we can at least get you through inspection that way. And as always with pneumatics, if they are the only thing preventing you from passing inspection is your pneumatic system isn't quite working, talk to your inspectors because you can pass inspection without pneumatics. We can disable them and all of your pneumatic systems become ballast or weight. So as long as you've passed everything else, you can still be driving on the floor. And that's a team decision whether or not you want to, how you want to play that game. But that is an option for pneumatics. It's one of the only sections where that is an optional system. Okay. Bumpers. Bumpers are probably about 90% of the problems of why inspections take so long. They cannot be thought of as an afterthought. They need to be thought of in consideration when you're building the robot. So there are a lot of rules about bumpers and how they're constructed. And I personally feel a lot of these rules have just come from historically trying to refine it so there's fewer questions. And as a result, they've gotten a little bit messy. So a lot of times you'll see in the rules, there's like bumpers must be within a 1/4 inch. There's a lot of these 1/4 inch gaps are allowed. And that's purely because one of the earlier years, they had bumpers. They didn't have this and they had to be perfectly flush. And that meant no bolt head. So people were like drilling into their bumpers and their frames to make sure everything was perfectly flush. And it was not necessary. So my tips for bumpers are A, read the rules, and B, don't push them to the limits. Don't bank on that 1/4 inch gap. That 1/4 inch gap is there in case things don't quite align, things aren't quite flush, just to make your lives easier. So don't plan on that. Make sure the bumpers are tightened down. And I'm going to go quickly, as I think this is a common one I've seen with the bumpers, is what is wrong with these bumpers? And the main problems are in the corners here. These corners are unsupported. So technically, if you look at it, here's the frame perimeter, which have these diagonal walls. And I purposely made them like 4 inches by 1/2 inch. So unfortunately, here's the frame perimeter. Now we have corners that are unprotected, just doesn't quite work. So here's a couple ideas on how to fix it. Number one, you can make these hard to make corner bumpers, diagonals, and then you lose your gap. You can just extend the metal on the side so it's connected, or you can just build it all the way around these little corners. So it just has to be supported, and for various definitions of supported. And that's really definitely for in terms of Chesapeake. There's also a lot of rules about bumpers on, spacing of letters and how tall the numbers have to be. Really, we're looking for the spirit of the rule there. Can we read it from across the field? Can the refs, immediately know what robots they're looking at? All of that. But the main ones are the hard to get ones really are make sure your numbers are painted on there before you get to the competition. Please have your bumpers built before you get to the competition. And please practice putting them on and off. Okay, I think that's pretty much, yes. Oh yeah, and have spare mounting hardware. Yep. Assume the only deep socket wrench capable of reaching those nuts and bolts is in someone else's pocket and they have ran out tape for whatever reason. Okay. Most common inspection issues that I have seen are bumpers, bumpers, and bumpers. And number 4, they take 20 minutes to put on and off. And a lot of times the inspectors are standing there waiting. We don't have a lot of time for inspections. So this year, especially if you're taking, it looks like it's going to take you 20 minutes, we're going to have that inspector move on to another robot in the meantime to try and get everyone done. So we don't like to do that because, then you're partially done, which is usually okay, but we like to get you done, get you past, and then get you relieve the stress and let you go out and play. Size and weight concerns, number 5, that's usually not too much of an issue, but when it is an issue, it's a hard one to quickly fix. Cutting your frame perimeter, if your frame perimeter is too big, you pretty much have to cut off part of your robot. And at that point, you also have to usually redo half your bumpers, if not all of them. So that's just one of them. That's a time-consuming fix. And then weight, you have to, either cut off metal, remove motor, depending on how overweight you are. That can be a big one. Insecure battery mounts, these are usually perfectly fine during inspections, but as the matches progress, they get worse and worse until we start having robots with batteries that fall off. Number 7, that emergency power switch, make it easy to hit. We've had a number of teams in the past, we've asked them to move it. And that's always kind of it's usually an afterthought, but yeah, try to make sure that one's easy because we don't want to have you to move it because that also requires usually digging through and finding some new wires and where can it fit, and everything impacts. Okay, 8 and 9 are kind of related. 8, wrong software version on the driver station. Please try and power up your robot in the pits before you get there, tethered, all of that ready to go. A lot of times inspections take longer than they need to because of the software version on the driver station, and then you have to find the computer and the student and the cables, which brings me to number 9 is a lot of times we forget for the inspections, we do need to power on the robot, which means we need the cable, the computer, the software, and the student who knows how to turn it all on. And then finally, pneumatics. A lot of times it really is just too many leaks to check everything. And then it's a lot of times, because the inspectors, we all love robots too, we want to see it work. So we want to see it. So we help try to find the leaks and do all this stuff. But unfortunately this year, I think we're going to, have to move on to other robots rather than, as much as it hates it, as much as we'd love to sit there and, talk robots with you all day and make sure it's working to the best, we're going to have to. Okay, finally, are a few more things. Inspections, not just limited to that one little time at the day once you pass your initial inspections. There's also re-inspections, which we can do pretty much at any time. Mostly I want to, usually when we're asking you to do a re-inspection, it's to confirm something is good. Often this is because the referees have seen something on the field that looked like it might be off, but they want to confirm it before the next match because they hate giving penalties and we don't want to have any penalties. So a lot of times we're just reaffirming they're good so we can either convince ourselves or convince the refs that everything is still good. Second is you can get re-inspected anytime when you make a change or fixes to your robot. Usually all of these re-inspections are pretty quick. We ask you what you changed, we take a quick look, we make a note in your file. These are not full re-inspections. Usually it's very, very quick. I always try and tell teams, if you had 1 or 2 zip ties, that's not something we need to re-inspect. If you had 1 to 2 pounds of something, that's what I really care about. If you had 1 to 2 pounds of zip ties, I do want to see that because I want to see what 2 pounds of zip ties on your robot's doing. You'll also probably see inspectors in the queuing when you guys are lined up. And you may have noticed that before in previous competitions. We're not looking for things to prevent you from going out onto your match. We're looking for things that will prevent penalties. So we're at that, we're kind of making sure your bumpers are attached, loose battery cables, that everything will fit within frame perimeter. Anything we flag as we're questionable, we'll talk to you after the match, unless it's a safety concern. But for the most part, those inspectors in queuing, we're there trying to make sure that you're still good and that no one has to deal with penalties. And then finally, there is a final inspection before the playoff matches. Again, this is not a full re-inspection. We're going to reweigh your robot. And usually we do that with one of the bumpers on, red or blue. And from there, we compare the weight on what it was when we first inspected it. If it's the exact same weight, you're perfectly fine. Nothing has changed. If it's a pound, half a pound off, you're fine. If suddenly your robot is 15 or 10, 20 pounds heavier and you haven't come and seen us, now we're going to start asking questions. So even if your robot is underweight and you add 20 pounds, please come and talk to us just so we can mark it off and mark it in the notes. Many, I can almost guarantee you, probably 90% of the people, when we ask, have you made any changes to their robot? They will say no. And then their robot will weigh 5 pounds heavier. And then we will say, something has changed. And then they stare blankly, trying to remember what happened in the past 2 days. And then we was like, okay, did you add a bracket? Did you do this? Did you? And like, oh, right, we removed that panel, we put on this panel, and we moved these brackets and changed these to metal. So we're looking for things that have changed. So if you do re-inspections, you don't have to remember all of that. We just make little notes. It's usually pretty quick. Okay, so I think we have like 2 more slides. 1, go through the checklist yourselves. Big one. Don't push the limits. Don't push the limits on things. Yeah. And then while in the inspections, please write down the fixes the inspector tells you. You don't have to memorize it. If you're confused by something they've asked you to fix, ask them to repeat it. Re-inspections make the final inspections much less stressful. Oh, and this is a really big one. If a fix is going to take you several hours to complete it, or it's just going to take a while and you will miss matches, come talk to us. Either the inspector who's done it or come talk to your lead robot inspector, and we'll see what we can do. A lot of us have been doing this for many years. We are very good at coming up with very creative solutions that will get you through inspection. And then also a lot of times we find it's just a miscommunication on what has to be done. So please, if it looks like you know your robot and you know your team better, if it looks like it's going to take you like a whole day to make sure that's done, come talk to us. We will see what we can do. Yes. And often, finally, the last one, don't assume you have to miss any matches. We've had many teams who I come up to, I'm like, okay, how's it going? They're like, we need to talk about this. And then I find out, when's your next match? And then someone else is like, oh yeah, our next match is, in an hour. And someone else is like, well, technically it's in like 6 minutes. And everyone's like, we're not making that one. And they've already just written it off. And I'm like, no. Inspectors, we try to be nice. We try to be friendly. Push comes to shove, we can inspect your robots very quickly if we need to. So our goal is to get you into the matches and get you playing so your robot makes it onto the field. Our goal is to get you out there playing, not to, be hanging with us inspectors as much as we love to hang with you. Cool. I think that is it. final thoughts. Perfect. Random note, all of the inspectors are humans and we are all volunteers. So like I said, if somebody's, multiple hour fix, get a second opinion before you, dismantle your entire robot. And you may have to deal with different inspectors just as because we're trying to move things along. Okay. Yeah, mostly just talk to us. If you have any concerns, let us know ahead of time. Let us know. We've been doing this. We know these first robots. We know usually what it takes to build them. Yeah, and our goal is to get you out there on the field. We want everyone out there for every match. Number one being safety, and number two, so everyone's following the same rules. That way, when you guys win, you beat the other teams. You won not because your robot had some advantage. You did it because you and your robot were amazing. So, and then we want there to be no question about that. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think inspection can often be a pretty stressful process, so it's nice, I think, to be able to humanize it and get the perspective of inspectors really being there to help and support, which I think is really, really important perspective there. So thanks for being with us today. For audience members, stay tuned for the next chat, Scouting 2022, How Will Single Day FRC Events Play Out, in just a few moments here. We want to again thank our first Chesapeake Chat sponsor, Newport News Shipbuilding, for the generous support of this program and of our 2022 First Chesapeake District Championship. Please enjoy this short video about them. Bye, y'all.